clock ticked softly in the background as Lisa sat at the kitchen table, the pages of her carefully written speech spread before her. She had reviewed them countless times, each word meticulously chosen, each argument finely tuned. The 3 pages laid out before her weren't just words, they were her lifeline. She knew she couldn't lose with this speech. She had accounted for every possible rebuttal, prepared for every counterattack. In a way, it felt like a battle plan, and Lisa was ready for war. But as she sat there, alone in the quiet house, a strange sense of unease began to creep in. What if she did lose? What if this didn't go the way she had planned? She quickly brushed the thought aside, forcing a smile onto her face. There was too much at stake now, too much to risk. She had to be strong. She stood up from the table, the scrape of the chair against the tiles echoing in the stillness. She busied herself in the kitchen, trying to distract herself from the storm of thoughts swirling in her mind. Her husband, Dave, would be home soon, and she needed to be ready. This was a conversation that could change everything, and she had to control it, had to steer it to the conclusion she wanted. The relationship between Lisa and Dave had always been solid, at least, that's what she had thought. They had been married for 18 years, had 2 beautiful children, and had built a life together that many would envy. But over the past few months, something had shifted. It all started 7 months ago, when John Stanhope had transferred from another office to become her new boss. At first, their relationship was strictly professional, but as time went on, things began to change. John was different from Dave. He was younger, single, and he seemed to understand her in ways that Dave no longer did. They shared similar tastes in art, movies, and fashion. They began to spend more and more time together, and before she knew it, Lisa found herself drawn to him in ways she hadn't felt in years. It started innocently enough, late nights at the office, working on projects, followed by dinners where they would discuss work and life. But as the months passed, the lines began to blur. John would compliment her on her appearance, on her work, and Lisa, who had been feeling the weight of age creeping up on her, found herself flattered. The compliments, the attention, they were intoxicating, and she started to crave them more and more. She began to make excuses to spend time with John, even if it meant skipping family dinners, or missing out on time with her children. Dave noticed the changes in her, but he didn't confront her. Instead, he picked up the slack at home, taking care of the kids, cooking dinner, and making sure everything was running smoothly. Lisa told herself that it was just a phase, that she was entitled to a little time for herself after years of being the perfect wife and mother. She justified her actions by telling herself that she wasn't doing anything wrong, that she was just enjoying the attention. But deep down, she knew that she was playing with fire. The turning point came 3 months ago, on a Saturday afternoon. After a pleasant lunch filled with laughter and compliments, John had suggested they book a hotel room for the afternoon. Lisa had laughed it off at first, thinking it was a joke, but when she saw the seriousness in his eyes, she realized that John wasn't joking. The suggestion shook her to her core, and she quickly made up an excuse to leave, feeling a mix of anger and fear. She cursed John for putting her in such a position, but even more, she cursed herself for allowing things to go this far. The following week at work was awkward and uncomfortable. John treated her with a distant professionalism that hurt more than she expected. She found herself longing for the closeness they had shared, for the compliments and the attention that had become so important to her. She tried to mend things between them, but it was clear that John was waiting for her to make a decision. The decision she wasn't sure she could make. Things at home were no better. Dave, always attentive, began to sense that something was wrong. He tried to reach out to her, to reconnect, but Lisa, distracted by her thoughts of John, pushed him away. She knew she was hurting him, but she couldn't seem to stop herself. She felt trapped between the life she had built and the life she thought she wanted, and the pressure was beginning to take its toll. Then came the night she had been dreading. It was a Friday evening, and Dave and the kids were packing for a weekend camping trip. A trip that Lisa had completely forgotten about. When she questioned them about it, they looked at her like she was crazy, reminding her that they had discussed it at dinner all week. But Lisa couldn't remember any of it. She insisted that they reschedule, but they refused, and as they walked out the door, she realized that she was being left behind, alone. That night, the house felt emptier than it ever had before. Lisa tried to reach out to John, but he was unavailable, leaving her to sit alone with her thoughts. The next morning, she woke up with a terrible realization. She was about to lose everything, her marriage, her family, her stability, because of a man she wasn't even sure she loved. She had been so focused on what she thought she deserved that she had lost sight of what really mattered. When Dave and the kids returned on Sunday, Lisa tried to act normal, but Dave could sense the tension in her. That night, as they lay in bed, he turned to her and asked if everything was okay. The question hit her like a ton of bricks. She wanted to tell him everything, to confess her feelings and beg for forgiveness, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she lied, telling him that everything was fine. The following week, things between Lisa and John returned to normal, but it was a new kind of normal. While they still spent time together, the spark that had once been there was gone. Lisa found herself growing more and more detached, both from John and from her family. She knew she needed to make a decision, but she couldn't bring herself to choose. Then, one night, after a particularly passionate kiss with John, Lisa decided that she couldn't keep living this double life. She loved Dave, but she couldn't deny her feelings for John any longer. She needed both of them, one for stability, and one for validation. That night, she made up her mind. She would propose a solution that would allow her to have both. It was a risky plan, but she was confident that she could make it work. The next evening, after dinner, Lisa sat down with Dave and told him that they needed to talk. She started by expressing her love for him, reminding him of all the good times they had shared and the future they had planned together. She spoke of their children, their retirement, and all the things they still had to look forward to. Dave listened patiently, but she could see the worry in his eyes. Then, with a deep breath, she dropped the bombshell. She told Dave that she wanted to bring another person into their relationship, that she wanted to explore something new, something exciting. She tried to present it as a way to spice things up, to bring them closer together, but Dave's face darkened as she spoke. He asked her who this other person was, and when she told him it was John, she saw the hurt and anger flash across his face. Dave's response was not what she had expected. Instead of reacting with anger or disbelief, he simply got up and walked out of the room. Lisa sat there in shock, the words she had prepared stuck in her throat. She didn't know what to do, didn't know how to fix the mess she had created. She tried to follow him, to explain, but he was already out the door, the sound of his car starting up echoing in the night. For the first time, Lisa felt the full weight of what she had done. She had been so focused on what she thought she wanted that she had lost sight of what she already had. The thought of losing Dave, of losing her family, was too much to bear. She tried calling him, but his phone went straight to voicemail. She called his parents, but they hadn't seen him. Panic began to set in. What if he didn't come back? What if she had pushed him too far? The next morning, Lisa was a wreck. She hadn't slept, hadn't eaten, and she was filled with a sense of dread. She tried calling Dave again, but there was still no answer. She drove to every place she could think of, searching for his car, but there was no sign of him. By the time she returned home, she was exhausted, both physically and emotionally. She sat on the couch, her mind racing, trying to figure out what to do next. As the day turned into night, Lisa's anxiety grew. She couldn't stop thinking about what Dave had said, about the look on his face when she mentioned John's name. She knew she had hurt him, but she hadn't realized how deep the wound had gone. She had been so focused on herself, on her own desires, that she had completely ignored his feelings. The realization hit her like a ton of bricks. She had been selfish, and now she was paying the price. When the phone rang, Lisa jumped, her heart pounding in her chest. It was John, asking if she was okay. She told him about the conversation with Dave, about how he had walked out without saying a word. John tried to comfort her, but his words felt hollow. For the first time, Lisa realized that John wasn't the answer to her problems. He was just a distraction, a way to avoid facing the real issues in her life. The next day, Lisa went to work, trying to put on a brave face. But everything felt different. The office, once a place of excitement and possibility, now felt suffocating. She avoided John, not wanting to face the reality of what she had done. She spent the day in a daze, going through the motions, but not really present. All she could think about was Dave, about how much she missed him, about how much she wanted to fix things. That evening, when she returned home, she found a note on the kitchen table. It was from Dave, telling her that he needed some time to think, that he was staying with a friend for a few days. The note was short, but the words hit her like a punch to the gut. He wasn't coming back, at least not yet. She had pushed him away, and now she was left alone to deal with the consequences. For the next few days, Lisa tried to carry on as normal, but nothing felt normal anymore. The house was too quiet, too empty. The kids were staying with their grandparents, and the silence was deafening. She spent hours sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the speech she had written, wondering how things had gone so wrong. She had thought she could control the situation, but now she realized that she had been deluding herself. One evening, after a particularly difficult day at work, Lisa received a call from Dave's friend. He told her that Dave was there, that he was safe, but that he needed more time. The relief she felt was overwhelming, but it was quickly followed by a wave of guilt. She had put him in this position, had driven him to seek refuge with someone else. She had failed him, and she didn't know how to make it right. As the days passed, Lisa's thoughts grew darker. She couldn't stop thinking about the look on Dave's face, about the pain she had caused him. She was haunted by the memory of his words, of the way he had walked out without looking back. She knew she had made a terrible mistake, but she didn't know how to fix it. The guilt was eating her alive, and she felt like she was drowning in it. One night, as she lay in bed, unable to sleep, Lisa made a decision. She couldn't go on like this. She had to do something, had to find a way to make things right. She couldn't lose Dave, couldn't lose her family. They were everything to her, and she was willing to do whatever it took to get them back. The next morning, she called Dave's friend and asked to meet with him. She didn't know what she was going to say, didn't know how she was going to convince him to come home, but she had to try. When she arrived at the cafe, she was a bundle of nerves, her hands shaking as she sipped her coffee. When Dave walked in, her heart skipped a beat. He looked tired, worn down, but he still had that familiar look of determination in his eyes. They sat in silence for a few moments, neither of them knowing where to start. Finally, Lisa spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. She told him everything, about her feelings for John, about the confusion and guilt she had been struggling with, about how much she regretted everything. She apologized over and over, tears streaming down her face as she begged him to come home. Dave listened quietly, his expression unreadable. When she finished, he took a deep breath and looked her in the eyes. "Lisa," he said softly, "I don't know if I can trust you anymore. You lied to me, you hurt me, and I don't know if we can come back from this." His words cut through her like a knife, but she didn't flinch. She knew he was right, knew that she had broken something between them that might never be fixed. But she wasn't ready to give up, not yet. She reached across the table, taking his hand in hers. I know I messed up, Dave. I know I hurt you. But I love you, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make this right. Please, just give me a chance. For a long time, Dave didn't say anything. He just stared at her, his expression a mix of pain and uncertainty. Finally, he nodded, a small, hesitant nod, but it was enough. Okay, Lisa, he said quietly. I'll come home. But this isn't going to be easy. We have a lot of work to do. Relief washed over her, and she squeezed his hand, tears of gratitude spilling down her cheeks. Thank you, Dave. I promise, I won't let you down. When they returned home that evening, the house still felt empty, but it wasn't the same kind of emptiness. It was a beginning, a chance to rebuild what had been broken. They talked for hours that night, opening up to each other in ways they hadn't in years. It was painful, and there were moments when Lisa wasn't sure they would make it through, but they did. They kept talking, kept working through the pain, and slowly, they began to heal. In the weeks that followed, Lisa distanced herself from John, focusing all her energy on her marriage. It wasn't easy, there were moments of doubt, moments when she felt the pull of her old life, but she resisted. She knew what was at stake, knew that she couldn't afford to slip back into old patterns.
Her reflection,
She and Dave
a
went to
ghost in the
counseling,
dim light,
working through their
stared
issues, rebuilding the
back.
trust that had been shattered. It took time, but eventually, they found their way back to each other. The love that had once seemed lost began to bloom again, stronger and more resilient than before. They learned to appreciate each other in new ways, to communicate openly and honestly. Lisa realized that she didn't need validation from anyone else, what she had with Dave was enough. As the months passed, they fell into a new routine, one that prioritized their relationship and their family. Lisa left her job, choosing to focus on her art and her family instead. It was a difficult decision, but it was the right one. She needed to distance herself from the temptation, from the life that had nearly destroyed her. One evening, as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset, Dave turned to her and smiled. You know, he said, we've come a long way. Lisa smiled back, her heart full of love for the man who had stood by her through everything. Yes, we have, she replied, squeezing his hand. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over their home, Lisa knew that they were going to be okay. They had faced the storm, and they had come out stronger on the other side. They had found their way back to each other, and that was all that mattered. In the end, it wasn't about the mistakes they had made or the pain they had endured. It was about the love they had fought to save, the life they had rebuilt together. And as they sat there, side by side, Lisa knew that they would continue to grow, to learn, to love each other, for the rest of their lives.